I'm going to talk to you about good banks, but really for only one reason. And I guess what I'm going to do is bring the discussion back to NAMA. I agree with Fintan O'Toole that, who told us earlier that this was really one of the very central issues. And I think the only chance that we'll dodge this bullet is if a new government refuses to implement the legislation. I do think the legislation will probably be passed in the next couple of weeks, but it will take a number of months in order to implement it. I don't think the Green Party will gift us with the opportunity of avoiding this disaster. We may be, heaven forbid, dependent on a couple of Finifoil backbenchers. Hopefully we can rely on them to act in their own personal, individual self-interest and bring this government down. What I want to do in anticipation of that potential event is undermine the major argument which has been put forward to date for the implementation of the NAMA legislation. Anybody guess what that acronym might stand for? Exactly, say it louder. Yeah, the only game in town. This is the only argument that has been put forward in favor of the NAMA legislation. And the discussion I want to undertake for just a very few minutes, and I underline this, I'm only going to talk about this for a very few minutes. It's perfectly possible to very quickly demonstrate without a lot of background knowledge in finance and banking that this is not the only game in town. For a reason I won't go on about, a couple of weeks back I was paging through the Sunday Independent, newspaper I don't usually buy. But there was an excellent cartoon with Brian Cowan sitting at a table in a tavern with a gun to his temple. And the distressed waiter and bartender are discussing this. And the waiter says, "I suggested cards." But he said it was the only game in town. He's not actually playing Russian roulette, however. In Russian roulette, you put one bullet in the chamber and then spin the barrel. In actual fact, in the NAMA legislation, it's the other way around. There are 5 bullets in the chamber and there's one empty one. And that empty one is only there because there's a remote possibility, maybe 1 in 6, I don't know, that we are at the bottom of the decline in Irish property prices, and that over the next 10 years, Irish property prices will recover rapidly. It's the only empty chamber in the gun. Here's an alternative, and I only really want to demonstrate that there is an alternative. In fact, there is more than one. Every proposal, including the one by the new central bank governor, is superior to the NAMA proposal. This is the best one, I think, but every other one is superior. It's the good bank proposal. First, a good bank established by the government would take the deposits of the existing banks. The only bit of financial jargon you need to understand is that deposits are not an asset. When you take deposits from a bank, you are not taking their assets. They owe the depositors the money. Deposits are a liability. So now that we understand that deposits are a liability for banks, not an asset, we have the good bank assuming the bank's liabilities. The good bank is then entitled, in return for assuming the liabilities, and of course the Irish government has already effectively done this by guaranteeing the deposits, it is entitled to a corresponding amount of assets. Okay, which assets would the good bank take? First, they would take the branch network. Okay. Second, they would take the IT infrastructure. And third, they would assume the difference in the best performing loan assets that the banks have. Voila, good bank. This bank would be controlled by the government, and the government could decide how aggressive it was going to be about lending into the Irish economy. If it needed further capitalization, the government could take any amount of the billions it's already committed to NAMA and recapitalize this bank. What would be left of the private banking sector? What would be left would be, let's not put too negative a term on it, a legacy bank. The legacy bank would have, one, no deposits. Consequently, the legacy bank would not be threatening anybody with the loss of their personal savings. Two, it would have the remaining below par loans. Three, it would have stockholders. And four, it would hold bondholder debt. The legacy bank could attempt then to work out its position. Oh, the other thing it may have is the existing bank management. Now, if we look at the bonuses these people were paid, it would seem to indicate that they were perfectly competent to work out the challenging affairs of such an institution. And if they do work it out, they can pay off the bondholders. If they cannot work it out, as Joseph Stiglitz pointed out at Trinity the other day, they can go bankrupt. In the case of bankruptcy, the bondholders' debt is converted to equity. They get stocks in return for their bonds. And then they share in whatever value is left. That's it. That's the solution to the Irish banking problem, or at least one. I've only talked for 3 or 4 minutes about it. It's easily understandable. You can look it up on the internet if you want a little more detail about it. The main objection to this is that the international bond markets will somehow punish Ireland for engaging in this eminently sensible solution. What William Boutier of the Financial Times called a no-brainer. James Carville, the political advisor in the United States, said that he wanted to be reincarnated, and he wanted to be reincarnated as the international bond markets. And the reason is that because then everybody would be afraid of him. Which maybe says more about James Carville than the bond markets, but yeah, okay, which I will do. Ireland will not be penalized by the international bond markets for sensibly sorting out its financial future. The international bond markets lend money to solvent places that they expect will pay them back. Assuming massive amounts of bad debt and keeping alive zombie banks is not the way to win confidence from people who lend money. Okay? Bondholders do not penalize people for their past. Bondholders lend money in hope of making money in the future. Among other things, this kind of proposal will make it more likely that Ireland will be able to pay its public debt in future. Thanks.